Couch Tipper.
Sharing the dream. Self-fulfillment and personal development the Gordon Brittas way. A. Acknowledgements. In preparing this work, I have been greatly helped by many other people, although of course the basic philosophy is my own. I particularly appreciate the efforts put in by my parents, my family and my loyal staff, without whom the Whitbury Newtown Leisure Centre would not be in the condition it is today. Richard Fegan, Andrew Norris and Chris Barrie have between them helped me bring my thoughts to a wider public by putting into words and actions some of the deeper recesses of my mind. I am also grateful to my editor, who despite clearly not understanding much of what he said here, nevertheless has not ever doubted what my words are truly worth. I am less grateful to the Whitbury Printing and Publicity Company Limited, who were given the task of preparing and printing many of the publicity materials used in our many campaigns to bring my dream to an unsuspecting public. Their badges reading, "I've been to Whitbury Leisure Centre and swum in the poo," had to be returned. Their explanation that the final letter on the word pool had just slipped round the edge a bit was not acceptable. They also managed to print 100,000 publicity leaflets for this, to allow for each inhabitant of Whitbury as well as several extra for visitors to the leisure centre from out of town, with the legend, "Gordon Brittas sharing the cream," which they then corrected to "shaving the dream." I hope you enjoy this tape. All facts have been checked and cross-checked. All errors are my responsibility alone. Or the Whitbury Printing and Publicity Company Limited. More likely theirs, in fact. Aldershot. Aldershot was where it all began for me. I don't mean that was where I was born. I was born in Romford. Nor, for that matter, is Aldershot where we lived or where I went to school. Come to that, I didn't go to university in Aldershot either, largely because there is no university in Aldershot, unless the Aldershot Military School of Needlework, Knitting and Crochet has been turned into the North Hampshire University or some such in the latest educational reshuffles. I am a graduate of Loughborough, alma mater of the Honourable Sebastian Coe MP, among many others. But Aldershot is where it all began for me in the leisure industry. After Romford, after Mrs Wilson's kindergarten, the Abattoir Road Primary School and the Sir Anthony Blunt Grammar School for boys, after Loughborough College and my BA in Sports Administration, my mission in life began in Aldershot. My dream was first put into action there. My first faltering steps on the road to world peace and harmony through sports and leisure were taken in that picturesque little town 34 miles southwest of London on the Hampshire-Surrey border. Aldershot was where I first worked at a leisure centre. It was an invigorating experience. We tried to put into effect all the ideas that I had developed over years of preparation and study, although not all of them could immediately be put to the test. For example, Aldershot, being a military town, is not perhaps the very best place to start a campaign to end all wars, as it would involve many members of the population of that town being thrown out of work, which in turn would hardly help another part of my dream to come true, the abolition of poverty. It's no good having the rest of the world living in peace and financial security if Aldershot is left in abject poverty and depression. My dream is for all people, not just those who do not live in Aldershot. I think we could have made greater strides than we did if it had not been for the unfortunate way my work there ended. Under circumstances which I have never fully been able to understand, the leisure centre at Aldershot collapsed during one of my days in temporary charge. I was only deputy manager at this time. Greater things were to await me at Whitbury. Official estimates later put the damage at £3.5 million, which was unfortunate for local taxpayers, but luckily very few people were seriously injured. And somebody had to dig 'em out. We had a good team at Aldershot. Anyway, After Aldershot, I was promoted to become manager of my own leisure centre at Whitbury Newtown, one of the most beautiful new conurbations in the south of England. At last the lessons of Aldershot could be put into practice, and the dream could be shared with the world. B. Backup team, the. It has taken me some time, but I now believe that I have the makings of a first-class staff supporting me in my role as manager of Whitbury Newtown Leisure Centre. Not all of them are yet fully committed to my dream, in the way that any good leisure executive ought to be if he or she wishes to reach the very top, but in many ways it is a distinct advantage to the smooth running of my leisure centre that the rest of my team are not cut out for higher things. It means that everybody knows his or her place and leaves to me the important decisions that only a natural leader and trained manager like myself can cope with. All the same, they are a fine team, forged and bonded over the months, welded into a unit. You could not, as I told Bry Kitson, the Southern Areas Inspector, ask for a better crowd. They are dedicated, loyal, keen, professional and competent. They reflect the strengths of their captain, and we set the standards by which other leisure centres ought to be judged. Featherly Gavin. I start with Gavin simply because I like to take my team in alphabetical order. He's a good bloke. He runs the slim trim classes and seems to understand the chubby young wives who attend just perfectly, and they him. Caring, sharing Gavin, I call him, for he is the one whose concern for others is perfectly expressed in the way he washes out Carol's children's nappies and cooks meals for his friend Tim. I believe he may have management qualities hidden beneath that clean green sports shirt and those trim blue shorts. Lancing Laura, or to be more strictly correct, Laura Farrell, as she once made the enormous error of marrying that remarkably unattractive example of the American race, Michael T. Farrell III, is my deputy manager dry. There is no doubt that she is a useful deputy. As I wrote in the reference I gave her when she was applying for a job to be manager in a leisure centre in Teddington, she would be a good choice for a woman. And I can hardly give a higher praise than that. All the same, she didn't get the job. I used to wonder whether she was in love with me. She once grabbed me by the ears, pulled me to her and gave me a long and reasonably passionate kiss for no apparent reason. I must confess to being surprised, as I had always thought of Laura as being devoid of deep emotions, and not with such strong biceps. But I asked Helen about it, and she put me right. Helen, have you ever thought that Laura might perhaps be in love with me? Laura? Yes, I mean, it wouldn't be the first time the older, more experienced man, the young, reasonably attractive assistant who... No, Gordon. Are you sure? It was a fairly long kiss after all. Gordon, my mind's gone on a lot of things, but I promise you, Laura is not in love with you. In fact, she's often told me how very annoying she finds you. That is exactly what she was telling me immediately before she broke off in mid-sentence to kiss me. I don't think I will ever understand women. Parkinson Carroll, our receptionist, is one woman I am certain that I will never understand. She has at long last mastered the art of greeting all visitors to the centre with a bright smile and the words, "Good morning, welcome to Whitbury Leisure Centre. How may I help you?" But I have a feeling that her whole life does not revolve around her work. This is perhaps surprising, in that her whole family certainly revolves around Whitbury Leisure Centre. Indeed, her whole family seems to live in some of the deepest recesses of Whitbury Leisure Centre. Carol has 3 children, Ben and the twins Emily and Tom, who were born in the leisure centre's sauna room, and they seem to be spending their childhood in the drawers of the reception area. This is not something of which I approve, but seeing that young Carol has managed to acquire her children without bothering with the legalities of a relationship first, I have come to the conclusion that it is best to let Carol get on with her life in her own way, although I do still try to give advice from time to time. In fact, she conceived the twins without even knowing who the father was, which seems to me to be a particularly slapdash way of breeding. It's not the sort of thing that I would ever want to be a party to. But Carol lacks self-confidence, which might explain why she never bucked up the courage to introduce herself to this man to whom she nevertheless opened the temple of her body. I try very hard to build up her self-image, to make her look more positively at herself, but she has so many other problems in her life that, as I've told her more than once, perhaps it's just too great a task for someone as plain and ordinary as her. It's good advice, that, and although I gave it on that occasion to Carol, it could equally well apply to everyone. Let's get on with our own jobs. I'll run Whitbury Leisure Centre. Carol will try as best she can to keep the reception. Perkin Linda is one of the keenest, liveliest members of our staff. She adds a bright smile to all that goes on in our happy centre, and might have had, I thought, the makings of a true leisure professional. But she is another example of a woman who is hard to understand. I once gave my staff a questionnaire to fill out to help me understand their hopes and ambitions for the future. You know, the usual sort of questions. Would you like to take part in working towards an ideal which will one day play a major part in promoting world harmony and peace? To which Tim replied with just one word, no. And, would you be prepared to give a wholehearted and full-time commitment to helping others find their place in the community through the medium of sport? Which Gavin thought worthy of a not really. Just ordinary, straightforward questions that any good manager would routinely ask his staff. Linda was the only one who filled it in properly. But when I suggested that she was the person who could help me carry the torch of harmony through sport into the next century, she locked herself in the stationery cupboard. All I said was, "Linda, I have something very precious to pass on to you." And she leapt into the cupboard and bolted the door. Eventually Laura managed to explain that my words were metaphorical rather than literal, and she came back out into the light. Porter, Julie, is my secretary. She comes from somewhere in the north of England, which makes both her accent and her actions difficult to comprehend at times. She is an individual in her own right, and I respect that, of course, but there are times when I wonder whether she brings the right attitude with her to the workplace. One day, I hope she may make a cup of coffee for one of my visitors, rather than just shrugging her shoulders and saying she'd rather not bother. But I respect her right to fill the working hours in the way she feels most constructive for the leisure centre. One day, perhaps, her views on what is constructive may be made to coincide with mine, as her boss. Julie is an independent soul. She once jumped into a river to rescue a dog. Nothing wrong with that, you may say. A humanitarian act towards our dumb friends, which deserves nothing but praise. Normally, yes, I would agree. But in this case, our praise must be tempered with criticism, because before jumping into the river, Julie took off her dress. This not only meant that the poor pooch in distress was put into greater danger as Julie wasted time disrobing before launching her rescue attempt, but much more importantly, the entire image of the leisure centre was put at risk by Julie's naked leap into the swirling waters in front of an eager audience who had gathered to watch the annual boat race regatta. "Gym girl in topless drama," screamed the local newspaper headlines. Julie's excuse that it was a brand new dress and she wasn't going to ruin it just doesn't hold water. The dog's grateful owner would have happily paid for a new dress to replace any destroyed by the corrosive action of our rivers, and he would not have had to avert his eyes in embarrassment as his dog was handed back safely. Nor would Julie have got paw marks on parts of her body where paw marks should not be found. Weatherby Colin is my deputy manager, Wet, and sometimes I wonder whether he is really cut out for a career in the leisure environment. He is keen, hard-working, devoted to all that Whitbury Newtown Leisure Centre stands for, always keen to learn, and a fully paid-up subscriber to my dream. Yet somehow he falls short of my ideal deputy manager wet. I know that deputy manager wet is a difficult role to fulfil in even the best-run leisure centres such as Whitbury, because it involves constant supervision of the pool and all its related activities. But even so, I sometimes wonder whether Colin will ever get to grips with it. Yet he feels he has found his niche here at Whitbury, and perhaps he has. If so, it is one of the most heavily infected niches I've ever come across. There was a time when I wondered whether Colin's unfortunate allergies and ailments could be put down to sick building syndrome, but I've decided this is not the case. It's just sick Colin syndrome. Having as a deputy someone who is neither athletically perfect nor even basically sound of mind and limb is a challenge, but one of the basic tenets of good business practice is that there should be no discrimination against any candidate for any post simply on the grounds that he or she is entirely unsuitable for the job and incapable of carrying it out. If that were a criterion for job selection, where would most of you be? Down at the job centre with your P45s, and with scarcely enough money to invest in life-enhancing publications like this one. That's where you'd be. Amazing to relate, Colin has a daughter. I first suspected that Colin had experienced the joys of fatherhood when he mentioned at a staff meeting that he thought I was right to insist on separating men and women at night. That's when things happen, at night. That's when people get carried away. They start talking to someone just to be friendly. They find they have a lot of shared interests, and as the evening goes on, they get closer and closer. Yes, thank you, Colin, I said, trying to drag the meeting back from this discussion of the philosophy of love and loneliness to the matter in hand, but Colin was not to be deterred. They have a few drinks, because it's her birthday perhaps. They stretch out on a gym mat just to relax, and before you know it, the court is ordering him to pay £14.70 a month maintenance for the next 18 years, for example. Call me intuitive if you like, but with my extraordinary feel for the inner perceptions of those around me, I was able to guess from this little outburst that Colin was not talking merely theoretically. He was speaking from experience, and £14.70 a month maintenance is not much. I think he was lucky that Stephanie's mum decided to emigrate to Australia. Stephanie's mum was lucky too, come to that. Whistler Tim is one of our foot soldiers, but a good man nonetheless. He is, like the others, a strong member of what I now believe is the best leisure industry support team in the southern area. He appears ever willing to cooperate, although he has a rather forced smile sometimes, which I am sure would fool somebody less sensitive to these matters than me, but which occasionally leads me to wonder how much he has his heart in leisure. Once, for instance, there was a little panic over the antenatal class, and I had to ask one of the girls to lend a hand at short notice. I consulted my staff schedules to discover that this in turn meant that Tim had to be volunteered for pool duty. Of course, I realised it was his half day, but it was one of those times when all hands had to be on deck. Tim smiled in his usual cheery way when greeted with this slight change in his afternoon's plans, but when I pointed out that perhaps he was a little overdue for a fresh green t-shirt, as a courtesy to those who'd be swimming in the pool, there was a definite frostiness in the smile. I can't understand that sort of attitude. It should be not only a pleasure, but also second nature to a leisure industry executive to ensure that he, or she, although in Tim's case I know the girls will agree with me that he's all he, has a fresh t-shirt at all times. Appearing in a state of perfect neatness and freshness is one of the perks of the job. C. Complaints. As I once remarked to a customer who seemed to be staring vacantly at one of our notice boards, if you've got a complaint, put it in the box, just like everybody else. We have a perfectly good black metal box on the wall beside the notice board to take complaints. It is emptied every 3 hours, and every complaint is personally checked by myself as leisure centre manager. I feel it is a very healthy sign that there are so many customer complaints, because it is a well-known marketing rule, learnt by me by attending several seminars on the subject, that a complaint is really a gesture of support. When a customer is so eager to ensure that his or her favourite product or service retains its reputation for quality, he or she will write a letter of complaint whenever he or she perceives a drop in quality, however minuscule that drop might be. This is not to criticise the provider of the service for that drop in quality, but merely to remind us at Whitbury Leisure Centre how important to the community are the facilities we provide, and how determined are the writers or writeresses of those complaints that the staff of the centre, who are the custodians of the town's health and well-being, are always vigilant in maintaining a facility that is beyond reproach. We set ourselves high standards, and expect the community to keep us up to those standards. That is why, for example, I complained to the Duchess of Kent about the piece of paper she dropped and suggested she pick it up. I am an ardent royalist, as are all good leisure centre managers, so I'm always concerned that the very highest standards are maintained by even the most minor members of that family at all times. And that is also why I suggested that the Rotarians do their best to keep up their hard-won reputation for care in the community by using the gents' facilities properly. Not lifting the seat is hardly the kind of example a major charitable organisation like theirs wants to show to the rest of us, is it? Even at their annual dinner. My action in giving the president a mop and a list of offenders was a gesture of support for the Rotary Club, and should not have been misinterpreted in the way it was. How can anybody expect even the most caring of complainers to continue with his support when his feet have been set in a bucket of concrete? Anyway, it is particularly gratifying to learn that at Whitbury we have the highest rate of complaints per customer in the entire country. No fewer than 3.42 letters of complaint per visit were received by us last year, including a petition containing 23,496 signatures, a total higher than the entire population of Whitbury, which shows what an impression we have made upon everyone in the area, asking why the centre was closed for 174 days during the very same year. That particular complaint was easy to respond to. When the morale and physical health of the community is at stake, we cannot afford to take chances with, for example, sick building syndrome or a propane gas explosion. Other subjects of complaint range from the length of time that players are allowed to use the squash courts. There is a serious danger of heart attacks, exhaustion and other physical disadvantages if any but the fittest of our regulars try to play for longer than 20 minutes at a stretch, as I've told many people in writing. The difficulties in deciphering a doctor's signature on the medical certificate required to become a member, so many are forged by people who do not take this sort of stringent but necessary medical pre-certification seriously. Problems of peeping Toms in the ladies' changing rooms. Actually, it was a peeping Colin, but it was entirely accidental and done in the best interests of our lady members. And the lack of places to hang shoe bags in the wake of the demolition of the building after the mishap with the fuel tanker. Courses! I have, in the pursuit of my dream, been on many different courses in my life, all of which are now detailed in a folder apiece on a shelf in my office, where they can be referred to at any time. Being properly trained for the job is important. Most courses try to teach us mundane skills like word processing or accounting for the enumerate. I remember that last year I went on a weekend computer course, and the bloke there actually taught us all how to program things. I am therefore now able to use all types of computers in all situations, and yet somehow I prefer the familiarity of pencil and paper in calculating. Why is it that computers seem to bring out the very worst in people, creating needless aggression and aggravation every time anyone merely taps a few keys for fun? That's the sort of thing we need to learn on these courses, not just how to enter and exit by pressing a couple of mice. But anyway, I've been on enough courses myself to realise that the important thing is the giving of knowledge and experience, not the receiving of it. These days, I don't attend courses to learn. I leave that to others who still have a lot of growing, both physical and mental, to do before they're fully rounded human beings. I prefer to organise courses so that I can pass on the dream to those who will be our future. Other people have business skills, and good luck to them, but my skill is people. I know how to deal with people. No course can teach a person people skills. You're either born with them, or you are not. Thus it is that at Whitbury Leisure Centre we run a wide variety of courses on a whole range of subjects of value to the community. Not all of them have been as well attended as I would have wished, but as I have said many times before, and will say again many times in the future, we cannot judge the success of any event by the numbers that attend. All of our courses have added to the experience of sharing the dream with my fellow Whitbury folk, and thus they're all successes. When Councillor Druggett forced me to resign from the management of the centre, my replacement was a nice enough bloke called Alan Digby. Now, I found no personal fault with Al, who was doing his best to keep the centre running, but I suspect that he found it was rather like trying to control a Formula One racing car where one has been driving a Ford Cortina for years. Nothing wrong with a Ford Cortina, of course, but a highly engineered, sophisticated piece of equipment like a racing car or Whitbury Leisure Centre runs on different fuel. Poor Al failed to understand that my management style, which has kept Whitbury Leisure Centre running at an astonishing level of efficiency for so long, involves running many courses. And he even went so far as to cancel Colin's unusual course on herbal healing, just because nobody ever came. As Colin remarked to me at the time, "You always said the important thing was to be there." And he was right. The course exists. The course is part of the overall philosophy of the centre. The course helps us to share the dream. Therefore, the course is a success, even if attendance figures are slightly lower than we might have hoped for. No wonder Al didn't last long. I could quote many more examples of the existence of the course being of more significance than the attendance levels. The fact that our life-saving for the elderly classes, for instance, were attended only by Colin, despite the fact that he is neither elderly nor much of a swimmer, is no criticism of the classes. It is a criticism of the type of people who failed to sign up for the programme. Do the elderly not realise that the ability to save lives in a swimming pool, or at least to be able to pick up a brick lying in 8 feet of water, is a necessary skill during the ageing process? Colin is now ready for his declining years, except that he failed to pick up the brick in anything more than 2 feet of water. But the old folk of Whitbury are not. For the management and staff of Whitbury Leisure Centre, that is not enough. These people must be interested in changing their entire lifestyles to respect their bodies for all time, for the body is the temple of the soul. My antenatal classes went rather better. I had to dismiss Mrs. Lucas, who used to give these classes, as her attitude was wrong, but I felt that I was quickly able to overcome the objections of some of the ladies who attended the classes, including my darling Helen. "You've dismissed the most popular antenatal teacher in the whole of the south of England?" asked Helen, eager to understand the reasoning of senior management. Popular she may have been, my darling, but she was also sexist. How anyone in this day and age can believe that men should be excluded from the experience of pregnancy is beyond me. This is the 90s, Helen. Childbirth is not a female experience. It's something we share. I think my style of running this particular course added something to the experience of pregnancy that had, until that moment, been missing. Of course, I kept Mrs. Lucas's soothing background music, partly because nobody could find a switch to turn it off, but I was also able to bring the complete family, both male and female elements, into the occasion. While we're thinking these gentle, positive thoughts, let's remember Dad, because sometimes he gets left out, doesn't he? Let's remember Jim, hey Brenda? and hope his worries over redundancy and the fall-off in the motor trade prove unfounded. Let's remember Bob, shall we, Elaine? And we all hope you hear some news of him before too long." That brought a particularly deep sigh, almost a sob, from Elaine. How satisfying to contribute positively to these ladies' biological experiences. Bob doesn't know what he's missing, living in Guildford over a newsagent with his secretary. And let's all try and forget that these are worrying times to be bringing a child into the world. We want to be positive and not think of all the many things that can go wrong with the actual birth itself, although we will be discussing one or two of those in next week's class. Customers. I don't like to think of the people who come to the leisure centre as customers. It's so impersonal. I prefer to think of them as statistics. Statistics are not important to the realisation of the dream. What counts is what is in one's heart. It is difficult to understand why some of the people who do use the leisure centre come here at all. They don't have any ulterior motivation, and they're thoughtless. I caught one man swinging his squash racket in the confined space of the changing rooms, and so as manager I felt it only right that I pointed out the error of his ways. "Excuse me," I shouted quite politely. The man stopped. "Yes, you with the squash racket." Members of the public, although they're often entirely anonymous, like to feel they're being properly identified by those in authority over them. "I wonder if you realise exactly how dangerous that is." "What?" he replied rather aggressively. "Swinging a squash racket in a confined space. Supposing some small child came running in here looking for its father. You could have slammed it in the jaw and disfigured it for life." Squash players never think further ahead than their next serve. "There's nobody here." He missed the point completely. But there could have been. Statistics show there's one accident per year in a leisure centre with a squash racket. "Oh, do they really? Oh dear. Well, let's do our bit for safety, shall we?" With that, he smashed his racket against the wall and broke it. "There, one accident with the squash racket. Now I suppose we can relax for the rest of the year, can't we?" He went on the blacklist straight away. Apart from being the kind of disruptive influence that we do not want in the centre, he also obviously has no grasp of the significance of statistics, which, though unimportant to the realisation of the dream, still need to be understood for what they are. One accident in a leisure centre per year with a squash racket doesn't mean that you can break a racket and thus be safe. How silly. It was mid-July when we had that particular discussion, so statistically we'd already had about half an accident. His extra complete accident brought the yearly tally up to 1.5, with still over 5 months to go. What is more, it wasn't really an accident because it looked to me as though he did it on purpose. Anyway, I took the only precautionary course I could. I put up a notice on the notice board warning all members of the leisure centre to be aware that we had overfulfilled our quota of squash racket accidents for the year, and that people should be extra vigilant as we were already eating into next year's allocation. It was an awkward period, I can tell you. Another problem I have with customers is that they do not understand my priorities. I cannot let them use the facilities when the Southern Area Inspectorate is about to call on us. I have to put the cleaning programme into effect. But there are some who do not understand this simple fact. One old man who was using the swimming pool all on his own, rather laboriously breaststroking his way up and down the pool, seemed less than gracious when I offered him the chance to take a short break. "Are you going to be much longer?" I asked him as he turned for his third length. He stopped and held onto the side of the pool, showing his obvious lack of fitness. I would have expected a fit swimmer to keep himself afloat without having to hold on to the side. "Well, I'm booked in for the next hour." "Yes, I realise that." Always take the customer's side. It puts him at his ease. "It's just that we're rather anxious to sweep the pool, and I wondered if you wouldn't mind sitting out on the other side for a while." "Oh," said the old man. That was probably all he could manage after his exertions. Shouldn't take more than 40 minutes, but it is rather important. D. Dream the. As I remarked to the national press shortly after Whitbury Leisure Centre had been burnt to the ground, managing a leisure centre has to be one of the most satisfying jobs in the world. It's all I ever wanted to do. Help bring people together. It's my dream. Was it Martin Luther King who said, "All I have to do is dream"? How right he was, for an American. There are several kinds of dream. Colin rather unnecessarily spent time which could have been better spent supervising poolside activities, recounting a dream he had had in which he was an eagle. "It was very upsetting," he said. "I was this eagle, but instead of soaring aloft in the clouds with all the other eagles, I was stuck on the ground because I had this mange under my feathers. I just want to find out what it means." Typical of Colin. The kind of dream I want to talk about is the type of plan for the future which is a dream at the moment, but will surely become reality before too long. Since my younger twin brother Horatio and I were young children, we have held on to our dream. Horatio, as befits a man ordained by the Church of England, is more prone to doubts about the dream than I am, but we still share this same dream. I remember once, as he sat in my office in the leisure centre shortly before he was due to take up a job in the Lebanon ministering to the shot at. "Now tell me if I'm talking out of turn," I said, "but I think it's time I reminded you of something. Of two young men starting off in the world, one going to theological college, the other going to Loughborough College of Physical Education. They wrote down on a bit of paper what their aims in life were going to be." "I know." "I've still got my copy," I announced proudly, producing a neatly folded sheet of paper from my wallet. Horatio rather sheepishly pulled a dog-eared slip of paper from his own wallet. "On my paper it says, 'Working towards the dream.'" And it did on his too. "We have simple aims, which can be summarised as follows. 1. Setting up of a world government. 2. Promoting team spirit. 3. Building a sense of community and belonging. 4. The abolition of crime. 5. Fairer allocation of the world's resources. 6. A religious revival. 7. The end of war. 8. The abolition of poverty. 9. Bringing people together. 10. Ending cultural differences. These aims can be summarised in the simple phrase, body and soul. But they're fairly difficult tasks for just one man to cope with, so we agreed to share the work. I look after the physical side of our culture's development, while Horatio takes care of the spiritual side. Some of the aims fall in between the two, of course. Ending war, for example, is both a physical and a spiritual task. It takes a certain amount of spiritual effort to persuade the leaders of the world that war is basically an incorrect policy. And Horatio's appointment as Dean of Beirut has certainly taken us forward in helping people understand the basic religious reasons why killing each other is a rather messy answer to our difficulties. But if people are not to go about killing each other any longer, what else is there for the young men of our world to do? This is where my job in charge of the physical side comes in. If we can provide constructive but still physically exhausting alternatives to mass killing and genocide, such as badminton competitions or free trampolining for the under-10s, then we can divert people's attention away from the need to machine gun those who don't necessarily agree with all our opinions. My goodness, if we all went around killing people we didn't like very much, there wouldn't be many of you left alive, would there? And if you think dreams cannot come true, then let me tell you the story of Edward Barrett. I first met Mr. Barrett in the third cubicle along in the men's lavatories at Whitbury Leisure Centre. He did not look like a sportsman, which was particularly encouraging for us, as we'd recently been trying to bring the lame, the halt and the unfit into the centre. And here was one of them. He looked more like a gangster, with dark glasses, a broken nose and a double-breasted pinstripe suit with wide lapels. He seemed to be searching for something which, figuratively speaking, I was finally able to give him. "Can I help at all?" I asked him. Of course I knew I could help because I'm the manager, but he did not know that when we first met. "What?" Poor Eddie, so unfocused, so aimless and drifting. Giving him a physical goal turned out to give him a spiritual goal as well. "I wondered if there was some sort of problem. If it's toilet paper, we do always keep a spare roll." When searching a man's soul for the cause of his physical distemper, it is best to start with the small questions and work towards the bigger ones. "No, I was just, I'm fine." No, he was not just fine, but then inspiration struck me. "Excuse me? You're not Edward Barrett by any chance, are you?" "Why?" "I knew it! You're the one who's holding up my squash competition." "I didn't know I was in a competition." That could be the answer given by every person who has failed in life. I didn't know I was in a competition. Life is a competition. And I, for one, know that I'm in it, well and truly in it, up to here. If you'd read your original application form, you'd have noticed that you were automatically entered when you joined the centre. You're in the final. I'm in the final? How did I get in the final? You've been rather lucky, haven't you? You had some buys in the earlier rounds, and in some of the later rounds by the look of it. You could see Eddie was pleased. The final? Here, that's not bad, is it? And off he went to play the most important squash game of his career thus far. Presenting the Whitbury Newtown Squash Champions Trophy to Eddie was one of the high points of my life. "Fairly won, Mr. Barrett," I said. "My congratulations." I always think that short speeches are the best at times like these. "And I can keep it?" "Take it home, put it on the mantelpiece, build a little display cabinet for it." It was at this point that I changed several lives by implanting a seed in Eddie's subconscious. Here you are, the town's champion squash player. I wonder if you've ever thought of using that position to help others. I mean, it's all very easy for us with our cosy middle-class lives, Edward. But we have to remember not all the kids out there have the advantages of you and me. Eh? If we could just bring them in here, and with champions like you to attract them, I know we could, can you imagine what miracles might happen? Miracles? Eddie was not one for making long speeches. The smile on the face of a child when he takes those first hesitant strokes across the pool. The look on someone's face when they win a trophy for the first time and realise that life's a little bit more than just hanging around street corners, getting involved in drugs and petty crime. You see what I mean? Oh, yeah. It can happen, Edward, but we need you to help. Think not what your leisure centre can do for you, but rather what you can do for your leisure centre. I have this dream, a dream that leisure centres all over the land will bring people together through sport, eliminating at a stroke poverty, war, religious and cultural differences, and promoting team spirit and a fairer allocation of the world's resources. It's all a question of inner certainty. Whatever happens, you have to hold on to the things inside you. You have to hold on to the dream. It was only a few months later, as I was about to be sentenced to 17 consecutive life sentences for murder and various other misunderstandings, that Eddie proved that the dream is worth holding on to. Regardless of his own safety, he entered the witness box at what I must admit was an unnervingly late stage, and at long last proved that he was not always a man of few words. I suppose I should have come forward before this, but I was scared of going to prison for 20 years, or of being murdered by my gang mates. But I can't hide any more. I cannot stand by and see an innocent man suffer, not after what he's given me. He's given me a sense of worth as a human being. He's given me dignity. He's given me the knowledge that I don't have to spend the rest of my life in the gutter, that I can use my talents to help others. He turned towards the jury, who were as enthralled as any of us by the fervour of Eddie's testimony. "I've spent the last 6 months in a leisure centre in Wincanton, teaching small children to swim, coaching adolescents at badminton, helping others find the self-fulfilment that this man offered me. He showed me what life can be like. He has given me... well, he's given me a dream." I could not have put it better myself. Some months ago, a strange bloke called Alan Matthews was ushered into my office. He was a doctor of some sort, and tried to say that my staff were under stress. He felt that the cause of it was that, and here I quote this Matthews man, "dreams can be dangerous. I sometimes think we'd be better off without them." How he could have reached the exalted rank of doctor when he quite clearly failed to understand the basic purpose of life, I do not know. I hope that he could read the surprise and disdain in my voice when I reacted to this heretical outburst of his. "But you've got to have a dream. If you don't have a dream, how are you going to make a dream come true? You see, if you forgot about world peace and fostering the brotherhood of man," he stammered, "and just ran a sports centre, I think everything would be fine." "But what if I'm right? What if my dream is a good dream that really will help people?" "It's always possible," said the doctor weakly. "I don't have all the answers, Mr. Brittas." "But I do, you see. That's why I'm the manager." D. Dressing for success. There is little doubt that my appearance alone is often enough to create considerable reaction among my staff, even before I've made my opening remarks at whichever daily meeting it may be. This is because appearances are not deceptive. One must learn how to dress properly. I believe that clothes tell us much of the man, or woman of course. A navy blazer with gold buttons, a pair of grey trousers and smartly polished black leather shoes, coupled with a bold yet somehow understated tie, gives me that perfect sense of well-being, which is so important for a successful leisure centre manager. Cleaning shoes is a relaxing pastime that I often engage in at times of tension. To be able to sit at the kitchen table, my jacket hung over the back of a chair, and the shoe-cleaning kit spread out before me, with the first of 8 or 9 pairs of leather and suede shoes to be brought back to a pristine condition, that is the way to forget about the cares of the world. Just sing a little song as you brush. I find that the rhythm of "I Know an Old Lady Who Swallowed a Fly" is in perfect time with the regular swing of my right arm, and your troubles slip away. My staff do not always follow my dress guidelines, which is of course one of the many reasons why they're still the staff and I am the manager. When Laura was due to be interviewed for the position of leisure centre manager at Teddington, I was able to take time to give her sound advice on how to look, even though I was enormously busy rehearsing my speech of welcome for the Member of Parliament for Truro, the Honourable Sebastian Coe. A good manager is never too busy to help a young colleague struggling up the ladder of promotion. "Wear something smart," I told her. "Something that suits you. And possibly a dash of lipstick. Make yourself more attractive. It boosts confidence, you see. There's no point in looking dowdy, as Laura does tend to do sometimes. And before an interview, she must have had plenty to panic about already." The rest of my staff are not likely to feature in anyone's list of best-dressed people. Gavin, Tim, Linda and Patrick look fine in their shorts and leisure centre shirts, but Colin remains a problem. I well remember the occasion I had to point out to him that the Palace of Westminster was open, and all Colin did was look around him in blank amazement. What is the point in my asking our public to observe the basic standards of modesty in their dress if my staff cannot even take the time to button their flies? Colin tried to explain the fact that his shirt was poking through the entrance to his trousers by giving me the entirely unnecessary information that he had put rather a large rhubarb poultice on a delicately placed boil, and the strain of this extra bulk within his underwear had burst the zip. And I could persuade nobody to lend him a pair, so Colin remained at the leading edge of our laws of indecent exposure for the rest of the day. Colin's general lack of understanding in matters of personal appearance, combined with an overabundance of wax in his ears, did once cause some difficulties with the aforementioned Member of Parliament for Truro, the Honourable Sebastian Coe. A blue tracksuit is just not the same thing as a blue suit. So it was really unforgivable that Colin should have chained the Honourable Mr Coe, clad in a smart regulation Conservative Party suit, to the side rail of the stairs in the corridor instead of an 8-year-old boy wearing a blue tracksuit, who was under citizen's arrest for attempting to gain admission to the swimming pool without paying the requisite fee. Yet this is a man who can tell the difference between the dress of the 10th Roman Legion and that of a group of Parthian mercenaries just by one glance at the hordes who were besieging the leisure centre at the time. So, Colin can make himself understand the meaning of dressing properly when he wants to, a quality which he proved once again when he attempted to impersonate a leisure centre manager in order to impress his long-lost Australian daughter, Stephanie. He arrived at the centre on a day when he thought I would be away sailing with my family, wearing a blazer and tie, smart trousers, polished shoes, and had even combed his hair. Somehow, he'd also contrived to lose his paunch. If a man like Colin, whose more usual look is of one who has spent the last 6 weeks living in a box under a motorway flyover, can appreciate that a neat appearance is the first step to social and commercial success, then how much easier is it for those of you who do not get your complete wardrobe from the War on Want shop in the High Street? Dress for success, and success will be yours. E. Eat, drink, and be perfect. We must all take particular care with our diet. The great writer who gave us the lines, "Call my baby lollipop, tell you why, his kiss is sweeter than apple pie," was touching an age-old truth. We are what we eat, a fact which is proved by the French eating snails and horses, and the Japanese making a speciality out of the contents of a sea cucumber's stomach. A properly balanced diet is an essential part of any healthy lifestyle. As a leisure centre manager, I have an obligation to society to keep my body in perfect condition, which of course would be impossible if I indulged in cream buns and hamburgers at every mealtime. The human body is a temple, as I find myself regularly needing to remind my staff, and once we corrupt that temple by not giving it proper respect, we downgrade our whole purpose in being here. One of my little tricks to keep my own staff from not overindulging is the lunchtime staff meeting. Of course, the staff meeting is absolutely vital to the smooth running of Whitbury Newtown Leisure Centre, but I must confess that it is not absolutely vital that I hold it at lunchtime. I do this partly in an attempt to make sure that nobody overeats in the middle of the day. We have our own restaurant at the centre. Helen seems to spend a lot of her time there eating donuts and drinking the coffee. She should refer to the time management section of this tape, as she does seem to spend too much of her life just hanging around waiting for me. But it does offer a full range of dishes for the dietarily aware. Fortunately, most of my staff are dietarily aware. Julie knows not to order anything with fish in it from our restaurant, and Colin has at long last discovered that one of the things he is allergic to is yeast, whether taken internally as a foodstuff or externally as a poultice. What is so good about eating is that you do not have to stick to the same sort of thing all the time. I'm slightly suspicious of vegetarians and vegans and all that sort of thing, not because vegetarianism is crankish, which frankly it is. I mean, all those straggly bearded people in horn-rimmed glasses and open-toed sandals telling the rest of us we should not enjoy the occasional sausage or barbecued steak. But because it makes life so difficult for the rest of us, we normal people who realise that man is an omnivore and will eat anything. But I am never one to be unsympathetic towards the foibles of other people. In a spirit of caring for others and respecting their ideals, however silly they may appear to be, we at Whitbury Leisure Centre have a number of purpose-designed forms that vegetarians and vegans are asked to fill in duplicate and before 11 o'clock in the morning of the day preceding their proposed meal, if they wish our kitchens to meet their special faddish dietary requirements. It saves confusion in the long run. Laura, on the other hand, is a good cook. It's not that I want her to find the way to my heart, although I suspect she is carrying a candle for me just a little. But when Helen goes away on holiday, I have sometimes been invited round to Laura's little house for an evening snack. She makes excellent omelettes. I like to visit Laura's home when Helen is away simply because I cannot bring myself to eat often in public restaurants. The standard of service these days is not good, and I find that the waiters do not have the sense of deference towards their customers that once was taken for granted in England's best restaurants. Nowadays, whenever a diner tries to give a little friendly advice to a waiter about the cleanliness of a tablecloth, or perhaps how to take down our orders by starting with the senior lady and working back anti-clockwise to the host, instead of bowing deferentially and saying, "Yes, sir, of course, sir," as any well-trained waiter should, they take every comment as a personal insult and go on the rampage, hurling abuse and mulligatawny soup at the unfortunate diner. I have learnt never to order lobster thermidor now that waiters have discovered how to create maximum discomfort to the diner as they stuff it down his shirt front. And I have come to realise how difficult it is to get rid of both the stain and the smell of a blue cheese ploughman's lunch when it hits your shirt from 30 paces. I can never understand how such aggressive waiters can hold on to their job for more than a few days. But I take it as a sign of the sad decline in standards of service throughout society today. What is more, for this amazing lack of service, they expect to charge us the earth. Like all normal people, I check the bill at restaurants very carefully, and it never ceases to amaze me the prices they think they can charge for items that haven't even been consumed. As I said to one restaurant manager just before he started poking me in the ribs, you can't charge more for 2 brandies than it would cost me to teach 3 disabled children to swim, especially when the second brandy was not even completely drunk. We all knew they were going to pour it back into the bottle, just as they were going to serve up the uneaten rolls again the next night. If I'd had a dog, I'd have asked for a doggy bag, but even the sort of dog that Helen would go for would probably draw the line at stale rolls and overpriced brandy. F. Fitness and figure targets. One of our responsibilities as leisure industry executives is to show by example how much more attractive it is to have a body glowing with health and fitness than one which merely hangs limply from the owner's skeleton and wobbles. We want people to come here and say, "Oh, look at the physique on that young person. I wish I looked like that." But it occurred to me one day that this is probably not what people say. Do my team have the bodies that other people really want? I looked around the staff room during one lunchtime staff meeting, and being as honest with myself as I could, I'm afraid I had to answer my own question in the negative. No, we do not, thank you very much. I therefore established my programme of individual fitness and figure targets for each member of my team. They took me 3 months to put together, 3 long months of late nights with the developer tray in the dark room and my pocket calculator and my multicoloured Whitbury Newtown Leisure Centre ballpoint pen which leaks despite assurances from the suppliers, Whitbury Printing and Publicity Company Limited, that it would not. Within each individual fitness and figure target file, I listed not only some general do's and don'ts, but also a personalised programme of diet, exercise and mental discipline that would take each and every member of my team over a 6-month period to a peak of physical well-being, except for Carol's. Hers was a 2-year outline. It was all very simply laid out. On page 1, there was a photograph of the file holder's physical condition as it was at the start of the programme, over which I had prepared a plastic overlay to highlight the areas in need of attention. Getting the photographs was no problem. With the aid of the local video shop, I was able to transfer tape from the security cameras in the changing rooms onto a still frame, thus obtaining the necessary before portrait to use as a starting point for the programme. Everybody seemed quite excited about the programmes when I introduced them. They caused a lot of lively comment and strong feelings were aroused, which I suppose was not surprising. It was the kind of thoughtful idea to help them all get fitter and healthier that they had come to expect from me as their manager. I must confess that I never really found out how well these programmes worked and how they had helped my team to come to terms with their bodies, as it was at about this time they sent me to Coventry for several weeks, and they were thus unable to tell me how much better they were feeling. Flip charts and notice boards and their use in leisure centres. I cannot conceive of running a leisure centre, or at least not one with such an influence on the physical and mental well-being of the local community as Whitbreeze, without a regular supply of flip charts, complete with coloured pens and sticky tape. As for notice boards, a tidy notice board does more than let Joe Public, and Josephine Public of course, and Ashraf and Sharmila Public know what's on offer. Much more. Notice boards are, as I've often remarked, the window to the soul of any leisure centre. So we must always make sure that they all have matching drawing pins and are all hung absolutely straight and not to that slight angle that can be oh so irritating. I find I use about 10 flip charts a week. Each lunchtime staff meeting tends to take up one complete chart, expounding on the theories of a new timetable, or explaining the difference between a high board swallow dive with double tuck, degree of difficulty 2.2, and a forward 1 plus half somersault with 3 twists, degree of difficulty 2.8, which are of course quite difficult for some of my staff to grasp, but which still need to be fully understood by any member of the team. Then there are notices to the general public, which I like to put up not only on the notice boards, but also in places where they will really be seen. The blacklist of children banned from the centre, for example, is posted in both changing rooms and by the footbaths near the swimming pool. The full names and addresses of their parents are also added. When we were fundraising for the new trampoline, I went on a sponsored silence. However, I still had a leisure centre to run. Even if I was not talking, silence is golden, but my eyes still see. I used my notice board skills to come up with a range of handheld signs which would cover almost any eventuality of a normal day at the office. There was, "Good morning, how can I help you?" and "I am the manager, I'm sorry I can't talk, I'm on a sponsored silence," helped me to explain why I was using the cards, although there was no room for "in aid of our trampoline," which had to go on a separate card. I had other cards which read, "Leave it to me, I'll deal with it," and "Back in 2 minutes," which seemed to cover most problems. I think it is a good management exercise to create these cards, even if one is not on a sponsored silence, to enable you to identify those situations which occur most often at work and to see whether or not changes to the style of working are advisable. In my case, I found to my own satisfaction that no changes were needed. The card stating, "Just do it, Colin," got rather grubby from overuse by about lunchtime, but I found the triple combination of "And where do you think you are going?" followed immediately by "Do you have any form of identification?" and then "I'm afraid I must ask you to leave," sorted out just about every problem that the day could throw at me. G. Game of Life V. Life is a game, and you have to understand how to play it if you want to succeed. So, I have invented the Gordon Brittas game of life to help everybody win. Well, that's not strictly true, because in my game there's only one winner and several losers. But that is the same in life itself, and the game will help us come to terms with our deficiencies and realise that a loser is a loser whatever the circumstances. Anyway, the game took me a great deal of thought and time to design, so let's just get on with it. The rules of my game are simple. So simple that they could be written up in a 36-page booklet, if you use small print and provide each player with a magnifying glass. Otherwise, it's a 900-page shelf bender complete with illustrations. Let me summarise the basic rules. 1. Before the game begins, each player must be in possession of A. a rule book, B. a badge signifying whether the player is a wise virgin WV or a foolish virgin FV, C. a score pad, and D. a pencil, not a ballpoint pen, it may leak and stain the board. 2. The wise virgins have to give the banker £1,500 before the game starts and on every circuit of the board. This money is invested by the banker in a personally managed pension fund for each wise virgin. 3. The foolish virgins make no such preparation for the future. 4. Every player, whether wise or foolish, is also given 3 starting cards. These cards show the player's aptitudes, genetic heritage and socio-economic background, summarising the balance between nature and nurture that affects us all. So, it may be that your aptitude card says good at languages, or musically talented, or, the worst of all, no ball sense. Your genetic heritage card will say short and fat, or prone to coronary disease, or asthmatic and twitchy, while your socio-economic background cards will reveal whether you're an aristocrat, of upper middle class stock but living in genteel poverty, or a C2 or D tattooed navvy. 5. As in the real game of life, you have to throw a 6 to start. 6. Then you make your way round the board, and every time you pass go, which represents another year, you take your salary and 3 more cards. These are a career card to see whether or not you've been promoted or made redundant, your family card to see whether you have got divorced or anything like that, and of course your catastrophe card. When I explained this annual 3-card experience to Laura, she wondered whether it was necessary to suffer a catastrophe every year. Tragic but true, I replied. It is important to keep the game as close as possible to the real thing, so that real lessons can be learnt. And where would we be if we tried to pretend that catastrophes do not happen annually, or more frequently? Here is a typical catastrophe card. You lose a limb in an industrial accident and are unable to work. Lose your job and go back 4 squares. The career cards have true-to-life messages such as you have been turned down for promotion again, lose 6 months' salary and take a fortune card. And the fortune cards reflect the harsh realities of life with statements like housing market collapses, flat repossessed, go back to the bedsitter. Of course, as the years pass and the cleverer players get richer, there are devices for avoiding some of the worst pitfalls in the game of life. Buying a car allows you to hop over every 3rd red square, the squares with the fortune cards, and sending your children to a private school gives them advantages when they come to be issued socio-economic cards and aptitude cards in their own game. They can then look after you in your old age, even if the personal pension plan taken out by the wise virgins has not matured successfully. When I invited my staff to play the game, young Timothy decided by the end of the game that it did not work properly. It doesn't work. I'm doing all the sensible things like working hard and saving money, and I'm just getting worse and worse off, whereas Gavin there is spending money like water and he's as rich as Croesus. It's not fair. My reply was immediate. That's life for you, Tim. Life is not fair. It never has been. In real life, it doesn't matter how hard you work or what you believe in, it's all based on luck. You work hard, you give it everything you've got, but at the end of the day, all you actually do is roll a dice. You roll the right number and you succeed beyond your wildest dreams. Throw another number and it all goes down the sewer. Gavin, the winner, was impressed. That's quite a clever game, Mr. Brittas. Oh, it's clever all right, Gavin, but it doesn't mean to say people don't get hurt. Gordon of Khartoum. My father named me after one of his heroes, the soldier and imperialist Charles George Gordon, 1833 to 1885. Gordon entered the Royal Engineers at the age of 19 and fought in the Crimean War in 1855 and took part in the Chinese expedition of 1860. He also helped the Chinese government of the time suppress the Taiping Rebellion of 1863 and 1864, which earned him the popular sobriquet Chinese Gordon. I don't think that I am inscrutable enough, or indeed as yellow-skinned and fluent with a Mandarin tongue, ever to be known as Chinese Gordon Brittas. Still, I keep his picture on my office wall and try to live up to his example. In 1873, he went off to the Egyptian Sudan and was governor there between 1877 and 1880. In 1885, he was holed up in Khartoum, surrounded by the forces of somebody called the Mahdi, who duly stormed his defences and killed him just 2 days before his birthday. That was very bad luck. According to the martial arts section of my Encyclopedia of the Leisure Industry, Gordon was a soldier of true heroic type, a medieval warrior saint, a Puritan mystic in the midst of 19th century materialism. He was a man who, left to himself, repeatedly accomplished the apparently impossible, chiefly through his own extraordinary power of influencing others. He never went back on his word. During the final stages of the siege in Khartoum, he put out an order rationing the water supply, and this little lad, one of his favourite servants, Abdul was his name, stole a saucerful of water for his dying puppy. Old Gordon had a soft spot for Abdul, but he couldn't go back on his word, and although the lad was only 9 years old, he was court-martialed and shot. Mind you, the whole lot of them were dead a few days later, so it didn't make much difference to Abdul's life expectancy, nor the puppy's. Gordon had a dream, rather like me. I remember his life was serialised in picture form in the Eagle comic when I was a lad. H. Honesty. I remember once remarking to Gavin, "You may one day learn, young Gavin Featherly, that not everyone in this world is as honest as you or I." This was on the occasion when I was inspecting behind the cistern in the third cubicle in the gents' lavatories and found a key. It turned out to be the key to a locker in which had been placed a black briefcase, which contained £650,000 in £10 notes. Some would say that it would have been easier to have left the key hidden where it was, and then perhaps I would not have found myself in court facing 6 charges of murder, 4 charges of grievous bodily harm, and 1 of possessing controlled drugs in contravention of Section 4 of the Misuse of Drugs Act 1971. However, that is taking the easy way out. There is sometimes a price to pay for being honest, but it is a price we have to pay if we are to live at ease with ourselves and welcome each new day with an easy conscience. Ask anybody what they think of me, and they will say I'm hard-working, honest and trustworthy. They may add other adjectives to that list as well, but that does not worry me. As long as the words honest and trustworthy are up there with the best of them, how can I feel that I am being misrepresented? One of the abiding principles of my life is a belief that the greatest of all the 8 virtues is honesty. I have heard Timothy suggest to Julie that I do not even know what the other 7 virtues are, but that is neither here nor there. The greatest of them all is honesty. So what does it matter what the others are? I think patience is one of them, and cleanliness. So many people think that telling the truth is something you only have to do when it suits you, and that it is somehow all right to tell lies to get yourself out of trouble, but it never works. Of course, one of the problems with honesty is that sometimes people do not recognise the truth when they see it and hear it, which makes it difficult for the few of us who remain committed to a policy of absolute honesty at all times. My secretary Julie knows where I stand on this. I know her heart was in the right place, even if her mouth let her down when she told me what she had told Councillor Druggett. "I said that everyone knew you were a Burke, but that you were an honest Burke." I have a feeling that another of the 8 virtues is respect for management, And if so, Julie Porter has some way to go before she can truly be described as virtuous. Jack Draggett, a man with whom I find I have little in common despite once casting my vote for his party in the local elections, was at the time attempting to find some small financial irregularity in the running of the leisure centre with a view to using that as grounds for dismissing me. I have had enough brushes with the angel of unemployment to know that a lack of honesty is something no employer can tolerate, but something which no employer has yet accused me of successfully. My dear Helen is, I'm afraid, rather a different matter. When she is pregnant, she gets a primeval urge to shoplift, and this can be awkward when one is dealing with store managers who cannot distinguish between mere light fingers on the one hand and uncontrollable maternal instincts on the other. But she has only 7 convictions, which is not the record of a career burglar, but a confused mother. Horatio Viscount Nelson. My brother Horatio was named after one of my father's great heroes, the sailor and imperialist Horatio Nelson, 1758 to 1805. I'm not sure that there are many great similarities between Horatio and his namesake. For example, my brother still has both his arms and both his eyes, and has not yet begun a tempestuous affair with the wife of the British minister in Naples. I've never heard him utter the words a peerage or Westminster Abbey either. However, he does realise that England expects that every man will do his duty, and he tries hard to live up to that ideal. In a way, I ought to have been called Horatio, if I was not already called Gordon. Actually, of course, since Horatio and I are twins, I was not already called Gordon when Horatio was born. We were christened at the same time, although I, as the elder by 23 minutes, was the first in the font. Still, if the vicar had made a mistake, I would have been Horatio, and Horatio would have been Gordon. Anyway, the reason that the name Horatio would have suited me is that Nelson's genius lay in his combination of energy, knowledge, and judgment. It says here in the boating section of my Encyclopedia of the Leisure Industry. Sounds rather like me. His decisiveness, personal magnetism, and affection for his subordinates and sympathy for his seamen, as well as his magnificent bravery, made him one of the supreme leaders of men. He was loved by those he commanded, just like me. How to recognise success. The sweet smell of success is something we can all savour, because it is all about us. But we will be able to breathe in the heady perfume only if we know where success grows. For, as a wise man once wrote, success is more than climbing the mountain, it is in understanding which mountain to climb. We all have our own targets to hit and our own goals to score. Success is in scoring our own goals, not in foolishly trying to score for somebody else. Success need not be expressed in monetary terms, despite the views of many of those who visit my centre, and indeed the views of some of those who work in it. Michael T. Farrell III is not my favourite man, partly because he is married to Laura, who, despite being on the verge of being too old, could have done better for herself. After all, as I've told her more than once, she's intelligent, quite attractive, and fairly neatly turned out. But the main reason why Michael T. Farrell III is not my favourite man is because he thinks that money solves all problems. When we were fundraising for a second trampoline so that we could offer synchronised trampolining, which is, as everybody knows, an essential part of growing into being a major leisure centre, he took all the fun out of it by just giving us the rest of the £2,500 we needed to raise. £2,495, I think it was. Gavin, Julie and Carol seemed to think it was good news that we suddenly had the money, so I put them right. Fundraising isn't just about making money, you know. Isn't it? Asked Gavin. I have hopes that one day Gavin might clamber up onto the first rungs of the management ladder, but if he cannot understand simple things like this, I may well be proved wrong. No, it isn't, Gavin. We were going to work for that trampoline ourselves, penny by penny, and in the process we were going to bring people into the centre. We were going to be drawn closer together ourselves. We were going to work as a team. He spoilt it all. To take another example I think I know something about, to some people a leisure centre could be judged a success or a failure by the number of people who use its facilities. But the mere statistics of attendance are no reflection of the importance of the centre to the community. As another wise man once said, there are lies, damned lies, and statistics. When Brian Kitson, the Southern Areas Inspector, called to assess the way Whitby Newtown Leisure Centre was serving the people of the region, I will admit that even I was concerned that he might not show the imagination required to smell the success of our little corner of his area. I even expressed my doubts to Julie, who is always such a pillar of support in times of crisis. Totalling up the attendances for each day does rather emphasise the occasional naught, doesn't it? Couldn't we show them weekly, or even monthly? You could show them annually, Mr. Brittas, and you'd still barely make it to double figures. That is, of course, not strictly true. There was the old man in the swimming pool whose towel was really disgusting. That's one. There was that little boy I barred for not using the foot bath, and the other one who I had to evict when he stuck his chewing gum to the underside of a bench. That's three. There were the 6 people so unfortunately killed in the machine gun incident, and the 4 old ladies from the Sunshine Retirement Home who were injured in the same series of events, so that brings us into double figures already. If we add the several hundred members of the Classical War Society who besieged the leisure centre without, I will admit, officially buying their tickets for admission to the centre, then the statistics start to look rather healthy. As I said to Julie, numbers aren't everything in this game. We need to look behind the numbers to see the real heart and soul of the place. It is not how many people come to swim, to play badminton, or to take part in aerobics classes. It is the quality of those who attend. In acknowledging the true success of our efforts at the leisure centre, I could paraphrase Sir Winston Churchill by commenting that never in the field of human physical development has so much been offered by so dedicated a staff to so few. Good old Bry Kitson saw it that way too. That's why he's an inspector. Numbers? He queried Julie's concern. Well, nobody ever comes here. Well, Julie, he said in his kindly avuncular way, you'll probably learn as you grow older, as I myself have learnt, that numbers aren't everything in this game. I remember in the days when I ran my own centre that we didn't always have huge attendance figures. But we had something else, something far more important. We had a dream, Julie. A dream. I could not have put it better myself. Humour. I know when to laugh, and when to let my hair down. Laughter is a true release in this age of anxiety and uncertainty. But there is no time for laughter right now. Do we laugh when we dream? We do not. And I have a dream. You should not think, however, that my sense of humour... Hold on a moment. Yes, what is it, Laura? Oh. Laura tells me that some people do indeed laugh when they dream, notably her estranged husband, Michael T. Farrell III. The mind boggles. But then Laura herself sometimes laughs when there is nothing funny happening, although in all other respects she is a tower of strength. You should not think, however, that my sense of humour is not as well developed as the next man's, except possibly Michael T. Farrell III's. I have made plenty of very amusing jokes in my time, although not everybody gets the point of them every time. I remember once remarking to Colin in a light-hearted and entirely unserious way that, as he was being even less efficient than usual that morning, if he had time he could take a length of rope up to the roof, attach one end to the lightning conductor, the other to his trouser zip, and jump off. But only if he had the time. Now, most people would have noticed the bantering style in which the remark was delivered and would have realised that I was only joshing with him. When a few minutes later we were looking at the security videotapes to check whether a Mr. Jackson, a maths teacher as I remember, and another name to add to the list of people who attend the centre, I knew it was wrong to suggest that we never quite made it into double figures, was telling us the truth when he claimed that 20p got lost in the coffee machine, what did we see but a bulky and poorly dressed man with a bandaged head carrying a length of rope? "It looks like Colin," I said to Tim, who was sharing the videotape checking duties with me. "So it is. Why is he carrying all that rope?" "Oh no, he wouldn't." "Wouldn't what?" "Colin. I told him earlier to. That is, I told him to get some rope and jump off the roof." "And that was a joke, was it?" Honestly, I can understand a person like Colin not getting it, but you would have thought a quick-witted person like Tim would be able to see a joke when it reared up in front of him. Of course it was a joke. Not even Colin could take that seriously. Could he? He hadn't. He wasn't up on the roof at all. He was in the swimming pool, electrocuting 15 Pentecostalists. Introduction. Welcome to Sharing the Dream. This tape is my manifesto for the 21st century. Our work is important in its own way as Lord Archer's Cain and Abel, or Rosemary Conley's hip and thigh diet. It encapsulates my own personal philosophy of life, my way of coping with life's little accidents and disappointments, such as the loss of a job, being shut up in a chicken coop in Bulgaria for 2 weeks, or the complete demolition of one's place of work due to a misunderstanding with an oil tanker. This seminal work, containing the distilled wisdom of all the works of science, business and literature which have shaped my unique understanding of how to make one's way through life, will teach you all the arts of management, of organisation, of communication, of healthy living, of concentration and of relaxation. I know my Shakespeare, and I'd rather be than not to be. I have read Milton. I've even used his sterilising mixture for the twins. I've studied Freud, both Clement and Emma, and I have suffered with the protagonists through every subtle twist of the plot of Five Go to Kirin Island. Drawing from these literary masterpieces, as well as from events in my own life, my tape shares the dream. The importance of this tape is such that it cannot, of course, be made available to just anybody who turns up with the correct money. Certain criteria need to be fulfilled before it can be released to them. Do they have 3 passport-size photographs for identification purposes? Do they have an affidavit from a JP, a leisure centre manager, or some other pillar of the local community? Are they wearing jeans? Do they have more than one earring in any ear? Have they ever been fined for the late return of a library book? Only if all questions are answered satisfactorily will the shop assistant be instructed to release the tape into the hands of the would-be buyer. So, if you are now listening to this tape at home, you have passed the test. Well done. You are one of those chosen to carry the torch of world harmony through sport into the next century. L. Leadership. Leadership involves hard decisions. It means not only leading when there are tapes to be breasted and medals to be won, but also being the first there when there are riots to put down and drains to unblock. It is the first rule of leadership that a leader should never expect those following him to do something that he himself would be unwilling to do. But in this job, there is nothing I wouldn't want to do. If only I had enough time, refer to time management and timetables, and enough pairs of hands and legs, refer to physical fitness, then I would do everything myself. A good leader knows how to delegate. Colin, however, is not yet quite a leader. As an illustration of this fact, I can point to the time when there was a slight health hazard in the swimming pool after a dog had forgotten himself at around the 8-foot mark. You're in charge of the pool, Colin, I said, conducting my own little management test to see whether Colin had learned anything at all since he became a valued member of the team. Leave it to me, Mr. Brittas, he replied. He turned towards the lifeguard's seat. Linda, little job for you. Actually, it was a big job. But I let that pass. One of the things you will learn about leadership, Colin, is that if there's a dirty job to be done, you don't get someone else to do it, you do it yourself. You mean you want to do it, Mr. Brittas? My response was a withering stare. I'll go and get me trunks and a polythene bag, said Colin, learning fast. Learning from mistakes. One of the great truths of life, which I have learned from close observation of human frailties over many years as a leisure centre manager, is that people do not change. The leopard does not change its spots. Nor does Colin, for that matter. He just oozes pus from different pores. The tragedy is that all of you, however carefully you take to heart the words I'm saying here, are doomed to repeat your mistakes over and over again. It is not in human nature to learn from mistakes, because you do not recognise mistakes in yourselves. If you could earnestly examine the motives behind your behaviour and find out why others of us find it so unacceptable, then there may be hope. But that requires you to be aware of your own unacceptable behaviour, which in turn requires somebody like me to point out the bits we don't like. And I don't have time to talk to you all individually in turn to assess your social deficiencies. I just hope you will recognise yourselves in some of the people I do have to deal with and take remedial action from there. But I doubt it. One mistake that proved a valuable learning experience for me occurred when Southern Areas Inspector Brian Kitson was due on an inspection visit and we had a plague of flies in the sports hall. Introducing a pigeon to eat the flies was only partially successful, as having gorged itself on flies, the pigeon then followed its natural inclinations, resulting in more mess. Doctoring some corn with vodka to incapacitate the bird proved completely useless. It was no longer hungry. Apparently, the Duke of Wellington cleared the Great Exhibition of Sparrows in 1851 by employing sparrowhawks. We brought in Mr. Gilbert Wilmot with his eagle, Titan. Love and marriage. Love and marriage, as I'm sure I need not remind you, go together like a horse and carriage. When my brother Horatio was thinking of marrying that Philippa woman, it was not difficult to identify which one was the horse and which the carriage. Still, he came to me for advice. Advice? Of course, Horatio, I replied. Let me tell you the golden rule in these matters. Yes? I once heard a wise man say, the way to handle a woman is to love her. Simply love her. Really love her. Love her. Love her. Yes, I see that. She's a wonderful person, said Horatio, making an elementary mistake. Philippa is not a wonderful person. She is the social equivalent of an uncapped oil well in a guillemot colony. It's just that marriage is a very big step. It certainly is, bruv, I said with my most encouraging smile. Put people at their ease, however lunatic the plan of action they may be considering. You see, it's always struck me that your relationship with Helen is just about as perfect as it could be. Well, yes, I am unusually blessed in that respect, Horatio, yes. So, how did you decide? How does one decide to take the step into matrimony? One small step for a man, perhaps, and for a woman, but a giant leap for mankind when one considers the normal outcome of marriage, children. Well, obviously I was in love with Helen, Horatio, but I also asked myself certain questions. For instance, does she share my interests? Helen does share my passion for the leisure industry. Can she manage money? Helen can manage money very well, provided I do not give her too much of it at any one time. Is she honest? And are we physically compatible? Poor Horatio is not allowed to find that out, being a clergyman. But the most difficult question, the one that cost me the most soul-searching, was, what sort of mother will she be to my children? I'm not sure that Horatio is prepared to ask himself all those questions, but I find that most relationship problems can be solved if one just focuses on the things that really count. Sharing. Will the woman of one's dreams be good at sharing money and sharing dreams, at sharing a bed, at sharing the joys of parenthood? And if not, how do you get out of the relationship without hurting yourself? My two pool attendants, Gavin and Tim, represent all that a healthy lifestyle should be, and I must confess that I'm amazed that no young lady has snapped either of them up yet. Young Gavin did have a fiancée, but she let him slip through her fingers. Her name was Jennifer Pelham Young, and she came to the centre once. It was Julie who brought her to my office. "Have you seen Gavin?" she asked. "Only I've got his fiancée here." "I'm afraid Gavin's gone to town for me, Julie, to buy a 3-amp fuse." A good manager checks that his team are good at the little things, and then they may be ready for the bigger tasks. Jenny was a good-looking woman, with slightly staring eyes and a firm handshake. "Gavin's fiancée! We had no idea, did we, Julie?" "Certainly didn't." Jenny turned out to have been away for 5 years after the tragic death of her parents, who were scientists specialising in the study of oceanic mammals. She and Gavin had been engaged for 5 years, 7 months and 14 days. All the same, when Gavin reappeared from his shopping errand, he did not look overjoyed. "Oh, Gavin, it's wonderful to see you," cried Jenny, throwing herself into Gavin's arms. Being married to Helen, I can confidently say that I recognise a passionate kiss when I see one, and what Jenny gave Gavin was a passionate kiss. "Now, you two lovebirds are going to want to spend some time together. In the restroom, I suggest, Gavin." There is a place for everything. As the wise man said, there's a place for us. Somewhere a place for us. Peace and quiet and something or other wait for us somewhere. As Tim and I strolled down the corridor towards the gym to set up the volleyball court, I could not help but show my surprise. "Who'd have thought it, eh, Tim? Did you know they were engaged?" No, I didn't." "Well, he certainly has landed on his feet, hasn't he? Beautiful, intelligent, and apparently rather wealthy. The ideal partner, I'd say." Those difficult questions about money, shared interests, and physical compatibility seemed already to have been answered. Tim was not as enthusiastic in his view of the situation. "Yes, perfect. Absolutely perfect." "Tim, do I detect a note of bitterness there?" Tim said nothing. He just threw away the 2 halves of the pencil that he had snapped in his fingers. "But how could he do it to me, Mr. Brittas?" It is gratifying to know that all members of my staff turn to me in times of trouble, like a bridge over troubled water. "Tim," I said, trying to ease his mind, "I think the best thing is for you to think about how Gavin must be feeling. Think how happy and excited he must be at the prospect of spending the rest of his life with someone beautiful and gorgeous and warm-hearted and who obviously adores him. Now, you wouldn't want him to miss out on that, would you? Is that any help, Tim?" Tim began crying. Were they happy tears of joy for his friend, or sad tears for his own selfishness? It's good to know that my few words helped. "There's something rather impressive about it, isn't there, Tim? A young, full-blooded male whose fiancée goes away for 5 years and he doesn't so much as look at another woman. There's temptation everywhere, we all know that, and from some very attractive ladies, even if none of them work at the leisure centre. As the saying goes, you can dance every dance with the guy who gives you the eye, let him hold you tight. But don't forget who's taking you home and in whose arms you're gonna be, darling. Save the last dance for me. Things did not go absolutely right for Gavin and Jenny after that. Mainly, I feel, because Jenny spent much of the afternoon tying me up with electric cable and thumping me with a copper pipe. The doctors from the mental home where she'd been locked up for 5 years, 7 months and 14 days seemed to think it did her some good, but I'm not sure that it helped me to view her in a favourable light. The doctors reckon she's well on her way to recovery, said Gavin happily. Mr. Brittas, I don't know how to thank you. It's all right, Gavin. Just think of it as an early wedding present. There, isn't going to be a wedding, Mr. Brittas. That girl's depending on you, Gavin. You can't cast her aside just because she's mentally unstable. No, it's not that. Some very successful marriages are to mentally disturbed ladies. At least you have the advantage of knowing beforehand and not finding out 2 days into the honeymoon. As can happen, they tell me. M. Management. There is more to management than merely keeping your desk clean and your filing up to date. Though not much more, that's most of it. There is also the importance of creating clear corporate structures and lines of responsibility, although inevitably these lines seem to start and end with me. There is the importance of sharing the dream with all those who have a stake in your business operation. And there is attention to detail. With these attributes, you will be a successful manager. I have, over the years, attended many courses on management and been given many copies of books on the subject with titles like Introduction to Management and Frontiers of Management. I've got a pile of books which has Thriving on Chaos on the top, Creative Management somewhere in the middle, and The Effective Executive at the bottom, under Assertiveness at Work. I've never read any of them, because I have an instinctive grasp of the skills of creating and developing an organisation, and these books would not be able to teach something which cannot be taught. Managing a place like Whitby Newtown Leisure Centre is the finest job in the world, but let nobody tell you it is easy. I was once asked to give a talk to a group of my peers in the leisure profession about my management philosophy. I had to stress to them that management is a tough game to play. It's all very well keeping the files up to date, delineating the approved customer parking areas clearly, and ensuring that there is a stock room full of pink, blue, yellow and green A4 paper and 7 different shades of highlighter pens, but that is not where a good manager's responsibilities end. A good manager sees the problems which may arise before they actually do so. A good manager spots those small things that have to be dealt with at once before they grow into something more serious. I've never been one for crisis management, as some of these business gurus call it, because I believe that nothing should ever be allowed to turn into a crisis. I think my record at Whitby speaks for itself in this regard, and at Aldershot before it was razed to the ground. As I have told Colin time and time again, we do not have catastrophes in this leisure centre. We have problems which we share and cope with. Music. The difference between a sporting activity and a leisure activity is that a leisure activity can be done to music. Thus, badminton is a sport, while synchronised swimming every Thursday at 4 p.m. in the pool is a leisure activity. Chess is a sport, but square dancing Friday evenings with Tim and Gavin is a leisure activity. I run a leisure centre, so music is a very important part of my life. I have a signet ring, which has printed on it the line from an immortal song. Climb every mountain, ford every stream. Actually, the engraver got it wrong, so it reads climb every mountain, fork every stream. But the point is still well made. That sums up much of my philosophy of life at work. There is another song, a recent dance number which shows that I can get down and boogie with the rest of them, that sums up for me in its majestic lyrics the scope of my dream. It goes, "There's no limit, no, no limit, there's 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 no limit, no, no limit." How true those words are, and how important it is that the impressionable young can understand, in the inspirational words of a popular song of the day, that there is indeed no limit, there's no limit, no, no limit. At home, I think my perfect marriage is encapsulated in the words of the wonderful song which appears on side 2 of The Best of Neil Sedaka Today. Love will keep us together. Helen plays that tape in the car all the time. It also contains the songs Little Devil, King of Clowns, One Night Stand, Solitaire, and our last song together. Helen says it sums up all her hopes and dreams. P. Parenting in 90s Britain. Sharing the dream is more than just telling your inferiors at work what to do. It is more than telling the whole world what to do through the medium of a tape such as this. If you really believe in the dream, then it must last more than one generation. We must look for people who will carry the torch into that great future, into a time when we will be no more than defaced photographs on a leisure centre notice board. We must become parents. In this I am more blessed than most. Thanks to the wonders of heredity, I, a twin, am the father of twins by my dear wife Helen, who also owns 3 children from an earlier, rather unfortunate marriage. Poor Helen has not always been lucky with her husbands. So, I have plenty of experience in playing the role of parent, experience that has helped me ensure that the dream will last from generation unto generation. Britain these days is a completely different place to bring up a child compared with Britain of 30 years ago, when my parents were doing their job on Horatio and me. The past is another conurbation, as somebody so wisely said, and to that I would add that the past is a conurbation without sufficient leisure facilities. I remember it well. Our parents tried their best, and I think they succeeded. We've certainly come a long way from Jellicoe Mansions, Romford. My dad, Jim Brittas, is the salt of the earth. A simple man who is easily embarrassed into feeling out of place when mixing with his socially superior sons, but the salt of the earth nonetheless. I think Dad sees his life as a bit of a failure. He's raised a family, of course, and he's been a good husband to dear old Mum, but all in all, I can see his point. When he was a teenager, he used to tell us almost incessantly all he wanted to do was be an astronomer. When he was 15 years old, he asked his mum and dad, my gran and granddad, if he could stay on at school and try and pass an exam or something. But Grandad just laughed. "If you want to look at the stars," he said, "we can fix that." And that's how Dad started as a night watchman. Of course, the older generation's theories of parenting still hold water, but the environment of today's world has changed so much that the young parents of today need a new set of guidelines to live by. The Dr. Spock generation are being replaced by the Beam Me Up Scotty generation. Today, leisure centres can assume a pivotal role in the raising of children in the way that the council swimming baths never could when I was a lad. And it's not just a question of banning kids for misuse of chewing gum or for leaving their bikes in the disabled parking spaces. It's more a question of preparing them for the great outside world. For the game of life. My introduction of the twins, Matthew and Mark, good Christian names, none of these strange Darrens or Damians or Gavins, into the Whitbury Newtown Leisure Centre was the occasion of their christening, performed by Horatio on what turned out to be not our best day. The whole thing was meant to be a celebration of new life being accepted into the great family of sport. So, of course, we went to some trouble to make sure that all was planned and rehearsed down to the last detail. The christening run-through did, admittedly, lack Helen and the twins, not to mention Horatio and Uncle Herbert. But, with eager stand-ins from among my staff, I had to close the centre to the public for just a few hours while we planned all this. In the end, the christening went well. Or at least it happened. Everyone who was meant to be there was there, including the twins and Helen. The fact that the service was conducted by Horatio in the toilets, half drowned out by the sound of the urinals, and that the party afterwards had no guests and that I spent 3 hours on my hands and knees up to my armpits in a soil pipe for reasons that I need not go into here, barely diminished the joy that Helen and I felt at the introduction of our twins into the world, a world of leisure in which they one day will be standard bearers. There is more to parenting than just getting the christening to run smoothly. Carol brings up her children in a set of drawers in reception, which I do not approve of. And despite a broad-minded attitude to the social difficulties faced by the unwed parents of today, I certainly do not consider that the right way to be a mother. Even the best appointed chest of drawers cannot ever really take the place of a father. How can a drawer give guidance through life's little maelstroms? How can a filing cabinet dandle little men on its shoulders? Can a cupboard, with or without hanging space, teach a lad to play cricket? Will a drawer, even with 2 firm polished wooden handles, be able to read a good-night story to a sleepy little chap? I think not. Single parents are, needless to say, cared for properly at Whitbury Newtown Leisure Centre. We have our SSS, the Single Swimmer Special, also known as Special Offer Number 847, which clearly states that any single parent accompanied by a child on a weekday morning may use the facilities between 9:40 and 3:35 at 1/3 of the standard winter season price, or completely free if they've moved into the area within the past 3 months. All the single parent needs is the rent book to prove that they have recently moved into our community, and there you are. It couldn't be simpler. Physical fitness. Physical fitness is what a leisure centre is for. It is the foundation of the dream, world peace and universal love through physical well-being. Physical fitness is the reason for the existence of every centre, and is so important that it cannot be offered to just anybody who walks in off the street. I have a chart on the wall of my office which shows that only 20 to 30-year-olds play squash. But that does not matter. Old people do not need exercise apart from the occasional game of croquet or cribbage, and children get enough by running around and getting in the way all the time. So that just leaves a few adults who are the ones we want to persuade to play squash or badminton or take part in our slim trim classes. They have to understand the dress codes first, of course. Booklet DC/21 gives the full details, but the most obvious rules are no black sole gym shoes, no tattoos on the knuckles of the left or right hands bearing the message love, and no heavy metal rock band t-shirts. They also have to satisfy the other rules of the leisure centre, like being able to exercise alone. I like to think that all those who appreciate what Whitbury Newtown Leisure Centre has to offer in the way of physical fitness training do indeed make use of our facilities. Public speaking. Public speaking is a difficult skill, but one which must be mastered by anybody who wants to be a successful leisure industry executive. Fortunately, I'm not afflicted by nerves or a stammer, or embarrassing bodily gestures such as scratching one's private parts or picking one's ears as Colin does. Nor do I have an irritating voice, which might grate in the way that Tim's possibly overeducated tones might do. There's no easy set of rules to follow, although I have learnt for myself that if pictures paint 1,000 words, then why can't I paint you? Let me take you back to a seminar that we ran at Whitbury a year or 2 ago. It was called Expansion in the Leisure Market. I wrote a rather moving opening speech, which, thanks to the unfortunate electrification of some Pentecostalists during a baptism ceremony in the swimming pool, never quite got delivered. However, I have the opportunity now to remind myself, and you, of the important points which I raised for debate during that conference. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow managers, I would have said if only Colin had not tossed that 2-bar electric fire into the pool, I bid you welcome to Whitbury Leisure Centre. A straightforward opening gambit, sincere but without any unnecessary humour at this stage. We remind ourselves who we are, ladies and gentlemen and fellow managers. And where we are, welcome to Whitbury Leisure Centre. So far we haven't put a foot wrong. It is my proud duty this morning to introduce our opening speaker, the Member of Parliament for Truro, the Honourable Sebastian Coe. Now we have to tell the audience why I'm speaking to them, and also to whet their appetite for what will come next, Sebby. Of course, this may create difficulties if the speaker who will follow is not as gifted a public speaker as I am myself, but this is a risk one has to take. Anyway, the audience did not come to hear Seb speak. They came to look at him and see if he was really as small in real life as he appeared on the television in the 1988 Olympics. But before Sebby, I'd like to take the opportunity to share with you a few thoughts on what I think this conference is really about. At this point, one can almost feel the audience's enthusiasm for the subject as they settle back to hear a well-reasoned discussion around the themes of the seminar. It does not matter if you overshadow the speakers who come after you. That's their problem, not yours or your audience's. However unfair it may be to someone like Sebby to have to follow a speaker of my experience and with my, fluency with the English language. The official title of the conference may well be Expansion in the Leisure Market, but do we not here have the opportunity to paint on a rather broader canvas? I think we do. This sort of rhetorical question, which the speaker answers himself, is a perfectly natural and acceptable device for the skilled orator to employ. Sometimes questions like this will excite responses from your audience. I remember once being asked to make a speech to an audience of several hundred of my leisure industry peers. The audience had dwindled to only a few true professionals as I moved into the second hour of my discussion on the use of footbaths to control entry into swimming pools, and it was about then that I asked the question, do we concern ourselves enough about the spread of athlete's foot in the community? Do we know the meaning of suffering? A voice from the floor shouted, yes, which was of course the right answer, but the rhetorical question is not there to be answered from the floor. I was sharply reminded of the weighty responsibility we all hold the other day, straight into a true story which allows the audience to relate to the world of the speaker and to take heart from learning from his experiences. When a young woman on my staff came to me for some advice, I suppose that describing Laura as young is stretching the truth a bit, but a little artistic licence is allowed in great speech-making. She was up for promotion, off on her first big interview, and you could see the pleading in her eyes. Help me, Mr. Brittas. Note the reintroduction of one's own name into the speech, just to remind everyone who they're listening to. Tell me what this managing a leisure centre is all about. Incidentally, it's not strictly necessary to do the funny voices when quoting other people. I know that Laura is a woman, but I saw no need to do a funny high-pitched squeak just to get the point across, though if I'd been quoting Carol, I might have done, I suppose. And I told her exactly what I'm going to tell you now. At this point, the audience can sit back and relax, because they know they're in for a really good story that may take 20 minutes or half an hour, and they will quickly lose interest in wondering what Sebco sounds like or even looks like. They just sit there, mesmerised by the sound of my voice. The most important thing to remember is that you are not applying for the post of leisure centre manager. This gives them a jolt. But isn't that what it would have said on the application form? Get your audience thinking. It stops them daydreaming. Then hit them with a punchline. That's not the half of it. You are seeking responsibility for the moral and physical welfare of every person in the community. You'll have to be a lot more than manager. You'll have to be social worker, you'll have to be critic, you'll have to be friend, you'll have to be father. Or in Laura's case, mother. Perhaps that is why she didn't get the job. I've never fully understood what let her down. Expand on the theme. Don't stop while you're in full flow. Give them the benefit of the wisdom that comes from experience. Where else but in a leisure centre can we draw together the troubled strands of our society? Another rhetorical question. A shout of "In Wormwood Scrubs" from the scruffy-looking fella third from the right in the back row should not be tolerated. Where else will you find young and old of every class and race playing with each other on the gymnasium floor? And where can ordinary people find meaning and purpose to their lives, a sense of commitment and caring, a feeling of hope in their grey and insignificant existence? Move into the triumphant crescendo of the speech, the moment in which people realise that what you have to say is not interesting, not stimulating, not merely exciting, but something quite different altogether. Is it, I wonder, an exaggeration to say that we, the leisure centre managers, hold the future of civilization in our hands? I think not. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I am not the only one. I hope someday you will join me, and the world will be as one. I am particularly proud of that finish. Words that sum up my attitude to the leisure industry and express the way that we can give it the expansion that the seminar organisers were looking for. After all that, even the Honourable Sebastian Coe would be an anticlimax. Relaxation. The health of the mind is not, if my brother Horatio will forgive me for saying it, entirely a matter of religious enlightenment. We will never succeed in our aims of peace, harmony, and a winning national football team unless we all learn the art of relaxation. To be relaxed is essential if we are ever to do things properly, and the secret of relaxation is confidence. If you are confident that what you are doing is right, that what you are doing is being done to the best of your ability, and that no criticism can deflect you from your chosen course, then you will be truly relaxed. I am relaxed. Unfortunately, not everyone around me has the knack of relaxation. When I was shortlisted for the position of British representative on the European Leisure Industry Standards Committee, a vital role in the shaping of the leisure industry as it surges into the 21st century, I needed my dear Helen to be fully relaxed when we were having dinner with the selection committee. With decisions to be made by the committee every day on the thickness of gym mats and the height of cubicle doors and the like, it was an extraordinarily important post, but one I knew I was made for. One in which I could spread my dream across an entire continent. All it needed was for Helen to be at her best that evening. I said to her, "Helen, this is possibly the most important day of my life. It is absolutely vital that you be witty, charming, and above all, relaxed." But it did not work. We even tried hypnosis. The hypnotist, rather a shady character called Silverman, explained that it could help people overcome trauma, tension, psychosomatic disorders, and worry. So we thought it might be worth having a go on Helen. Silverman had already relaxed the rest of my team so much that Colin said, "I love you," and took off his trousers whenever anybody said the word need, while Carol punctuated every sentence with a croak like a bullfrog at night, and Linda could only speak in barks and growls. I'm not sure that his treatment of them did much for the relaxation levels in the centre, but once he turned his attention to Helen, things improved. She really did relax, but I decided nevertheless not to take the risk of asking her to accompany me on that vital dinner engagement. I took Laura instead. Rules. The trouble with sharing anything is that not everybody understands the rules of share and share alike. This is even more important with something like a dream. where there may not always be enough to go round. Dreams do not come free, you know. Thus there must be rules to everything, including the sharing of dreams. In order to live an ordered life, to play the game correctly, and to eat your slice of the dream pizza without taking any of your neighbour's mushrooms or pepperoni by mistake, we must all understand the rules. I have taken the precaution of publishing the rules for the centre in a simple 2-volume work, 1 volume covering the rules for the centre and all its dry facilities, and the second dealing with the rules for the swimming pool with a special chapter on foot hygiene. There's nothing unusual or complicated about them. Who could quibble with the requirements for the enrolment into the Junior Dolphin Club, for example? I quote Volume 2 of the Rulebook, page 142, paragraph 3.418. Children under the age of 16 are not allowed into the pool unless accompanied by an adult. For the definition of adult, see Volume 1, page 28, paragraph 7.16, B, definition of adults. Or unless carrying a membership card to prove enrolment as a member of the Junior Dolphin Club. Membership of the Junior Dolphin Club is free, and all that is required is the filling out of a simple form, Form 284/C, Junior Dolphin Membership. This form asks for details of name and address, date of birth, parents' name and address if known, parents' national insurance numbers, school name, address and class, name and address and date of birth of class teacher, 2 recent photographs, some means of identification such as a library card or a savings book, an estimate of swimming standard on a scale of 1 to 10 from shrimp through halibut and jellyfish to salmon and killer whale, and an officially approved swimming costume in black, dark blue, green, red or white. Please also refer to the notice board, The Dangers of Sharing Swimming Costumes. Whenever prospective new members come to the centre, we ask them to bring with them 2 references from GPs, solicitors, bank managers, priests or registered property owners, as well as a doctor's certificate, providing that the doctor signing the certificate is not also one of the bearer's referees. Then, the probationary membership period of 6 months has to be satisfactorily served, with at least 3 attendances at the centre each month and participation in no fewer than 4 nor more than 8 centre tournaments or competitions. See Volume 1, page 312, paragraph 2.08, subsection 5, Tournaments and Competitions. And then you're in! What could be easier or fairer than that? It is not only in the way we enable the general public to participate in the centre which requires clear guidelines. My staff too need always to know where we all stand in relation to each other and the way we run the leisure activities together. The welfare of my staff has to be my first priority. Sometimes my staff inadvertently act in breach of the rules, as for example when Colin led his daughter to believe that he and not I was the manager. Impersonating a leisure centre manager is a serious offence. You could probably get shot in the army for something like that. That is why we have closed-circuit television security cameras. That is why we have a staff discipline book. And that is why I am always conscious of the need to protect them from themselves. I do not know how often I have told Colin that chainsaws and power cables do not mix, for example, but despite his copying out the safety manual 10 times, he does not always understand. That is why we do not allow unmarried female members of staff to work in the centre at night unless chaperoned by a married female colleague. And that is why council bylaws and both volumes of the safety instructions for minors are required reading for all new members of my team. Then there are the rules that cover a wider spectrum than just the leisure centre, although you will probably agree with me by now that there is nothing that really covers a wider spectrum than the leisure centre, because that encompasses the dream. I am referring to the laws of the land, manufacturers' instruction manuals and coded council instructions in the event of insurrection. I should not be telling you this, as it is probably a state secret, but at any outbreak of civil disturbance, the Whitbury Newtown Leisure Centre has been designated a rallying point for those still loyal to the Crown. The laws of the land are worth knowing. The Employment Act of 1985 and the Criminal Enforcement Act of 1984 are the two that I come into contact with most frequently during the normal course of events at the centre, so I tend to know the major clauses of those two off by heart. It was, however, under the terms of Section 4 of the Misuse of Drugs Act 1971 and the Offences Against the Person Act of 1861 that I was charged and found entirely innocent. T. Time management and timetables. Time management is such an important subject that I have reserved an entire section, shared with the dissertation on timetables, of course, for it. If we do not use time properly, if we cannot condense our thoughts into a few pithy words, if we cannot convey the essence of ideas without repeating ourselves, or without unnecessary obfuscation, how can we share the dream? At the Whitbury Leisure Centre, we organise 3-day time management courses, which I confess barely scratch the granite surface of this complicated yet crucial life skill. The longer course has been tested on some of the workforce, but their time management skills are so underdeveloped that I could not spare them for the 3 months needed to complete the entire programme. Except Colin, I suppose. I wouldn't mind him going off somewhere other than the leisure centre for 3 months. I have a simple solution to time management problems. I pace my day in segments of 2 minutes at a time. My staff are now familiar with my reassuring call of "back in 2 minutes," which lets them know that I will very soon be able to turn my attention to the next problem on the day's agenda. During my sponsored silence, I even went as far as to print up a notice that read "back in 2 minutes," and I used it all the time. It is a very unusual problem which requires more than 2 minutes to reach a resolution, or at least to get unmanageably out of hand, by which time we are probably better employed looking at the next problem anyway. Our life at the centre is built around my timetable. Nobody is allowed to make changes to the timetable, as it is delicately balanced and poised to give a structured duty roster of responsibilities for all members of the team. Even during August, traditionally a quiet time for us, the timetable keeps us all in the right place at the right time. The result is that we now have a sensitively run, well-oiled administrative machine honed over the years to cope with any crisis, from Colin's late arrival due to a weeping boil on his left buttock, to Gavin's knocking off early to take advantage of the discounts on duvets at Debenhams. Without the timetable, the centre would be a vastly different place, with people moving in an unstructured way around the complex building, without purpose and without ambition. How can you enjoy your leisure time unless you discipline yourself? How can people live without a framework in which to exercise? If time is money, then there is no such thing as free time. A leisure centre is there to develop us as human beings, to make the world a better place, and not just to help us enjoy ourselves in idleness. The sooner everybody realises that, the better it will be for all of us, especially for leisure centre managers. W. World peace. Without world peace, how can the dream be fulfilled? We cannot set up a world government without world peace. We certainly can't bring people together and promote team spirit. And I don't see how we can hope for an end of war unless we get world peace first, or at the same time. World peace is more than just everybody stopping fighting each other. It is more than persuading customers at the leisure centre not to open fire with machine guns when their 20p coin gets stuck in the coffee machine. World peace starts with the little things, like my scheme to award a friendliness prize, a pair of best plastic sunglasses, to any child who comes to the centre and speaks to at least 4 other children they'd never met before. It grows to bigger things, like freedom from hunger, which I have achieved within the leisure centre by instituting a system of regular checks on the crisps and chocolate vending machines, form VM/22, and by making sure there are always a regular supply of biscuits for Helen in the canteen. It develops through global moves, like Horatio going off to be Dean of Beirut, giving him the politically and spiritually exciting challenge of banging a few heads together in the cause of peace. One day, it is our dream that there will be members of the Brittas family in every troubled part of the world, changing things by their very presence. A Brittas in Bosnia, a Brittas in Belfast, more Brittases in Cambodia, the Middle East, the Falklands, the Vatican, and several in Letchworth. That's a violent town if my last visit is anything to go by. Fights breaking out all around me, in the bus station, outside Woolworths, and in the garden of the Peter Pan old folks' home for no reason at all. One day, we all hope to be able to say those wonderful words. Happy